Are you seriously going to eat, you fat blibbity blabbity blob? I mean, some of you might be like,
continual.
why would I want to start this?
Sensitive. She's sensitive.
You are listening to the Tami Talks Unscripted Healing podcast, where we share stories that are, you guessed it, unscripted.
That's the thing, this journey doesn't stop.
It doesn't really
right?
end. We have a general sense of the topic each episode, but really the whole point is just to show up and be authentic and let our inner child speak its truth. And I have continued to work through that story of constantly hearing, well, we don't want, got a hot dog on our hands. Yeah, guess what, Mr. Sabatsky, you do. So I'm so excited that you are here, and it is my hope that you hear yourself somewhere in the story so that way you can feel seen and heard as well. So let's start talking. Welcome to the Tami Talks Unscripted Healing podcast. For those of you that are returning, thank you as always for joining me and pressing play. And those of you that are listening for the very first time, welcome to my holiday edition, or whatever I'm going to end up calling this. I just knew with the holidays coming, hopefully most of you are watching this or listening to this on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. And I know personally how triggering the holidays can be in many ways. And a lot of people were already starting to think about the extra food and overeating and all of that stuff. It starts now, and a lot of people, it even started earlier. Sometimes it starts in Halloween. And so I wanted to address that and kind of put on my dietitian hat, put that bag on for some of y'all. I don't know why I just went into that accent, but here we are. And so, because I obviously had to overcome all of the triggers around that myself, because obviously food was my drug of choice for most of my life. And trying to navigate that around the holidays was always very, very challenging. So I thought if I can, shed any light, wisdom, help anyone feel seen or heard in their story around just the food portion of the holidays, I thought, why not? So I will dive into some of that today, but I also wanted to talk about the other stuff, the stuff no one really wants to talk about around the holidays, and why the holidays are actually so triggering, which I now know was part of why the food stuff was always an issue. And that's really why I wanted to combine this episode, because you really can't separate them. As much as we want to think that the food's just really good, it's more than that. And I only get this once a year. It's more than that. And so, because I cannot do surface level anything anymore, I can't just talk about the food without talking about the real reasons that the holidays can be hard. But first, as you all know, these episodes are always sponsored by Unscripted Healing, because that is my business. And I thought, since I officially have my journals, for those of you that are watching on YouTube, you can see how beautiful they are. They say unscripted notes from my inner child. And I have a lot of journals. This girl has written in a lot of journals. I have received a lot of journals that I have not written in. So I know a good journal. And when I created this one, I knew I wanted it to have the little wire thingy so I could flip it, because I hate the binders where you can't bend it. And I want to write on that page, and it's just this like, ugh. So I made sure that I ordered a journal that I would like to write in. So sorry if you have your own preference. But as I mentioned, I don't know what episode it was, about joining Patreon. So I do have that set up if you want to support the channel. And so if you join the top tier of $11.11, because your girl loves her numbers, for $11.11 a month, you can get one of these sent to you, your very own branded unscripted notes to your inner child journal, and write all the little love notes to your younger self, which is going to be very important this time of year. And so maybe I will come full circle moment with that here if I remember. So I will put the links for Patreon if you want to join. I have 2 different levels. There is the $11.11 or just $333 a month if you're like, yeah, I'm not really that into your show, but I appreciate the work you put into it. So that'd be great. I will receive that. And oh my gosh, maybe it's this time of year and there's just magic in the air. I don't know. Oh no, I do know. I take that back. I mentioned on the last episode that there was this massive 15-year cycle closing out on the 19th, and it just creating this whole new 20-year cycle. And I'm feeling that. I'm feeling it right now, where I'm just really, really, really excited about 2025. And I just got off a conversation with a future podcast guest, and it just like lit me up like a Christmas tree. And it really helped me reflect on my journey and really how far I've come. And I kind of felt this sense of gratitude for the level of patience and dedication and things that I have put into building this. Because when I think back, we were referring back to 2020, and we all know what that was like. That's when I started Fiercely Focused, and I dove into that program, and I ran it for 2 years, and I loved it. And then it was Nutrition for the Soul as I found inner child work. And, so that was 2022-ish, 2023. I was like, you know what? I'm going to completely demolish my entire brand and my entire life and start over, completely start over. And so I had lots of hopes and dreams and goals for 2024, but apparently God had other plans for me. It's like, yeah, we still got some work to do here. So as much as I did the demo of my life, I've had to go a little slower in looking at the blueprint of what it's going to look like moving forward. And while I put some really, really cool pieces, laid some of that foundation this year, I have so much more to build. And now I feel like I'm getting in some really key people and opportunities to help build this back up and build this wall, this foundation, this new home, really, in a sense, this new life. And so I'm glad I took the time to figure out what that's supposed to look like, who's supposed to be there. Because I believe in Amanda's episode with Try for Kids, we talked about when you go through that demo of your life, you better be really careful when it comes to that rebuilding phase. You don't want to put the same bricks back together, right? Some of those you have to leave behind, and that can be probably some of the hardest parts of that phase. But I'm really proud of myself for the time I have given to really do the healing work myself so I could feel really firm in this foundation. And so that's really kind of what 2024 has been for me. So I am freaking jacked for 2025 because your girl's got some plans. And with my new business manager, I feel like I can do anything because I don't have to worry about that part. And she's an idea generator. So I sent her a text today because it is Sagittarius season, which means it's birthday month for your girl. And, I was like, I want to do some kind of fun giveaways and stuff. And she doesn't even bother texting me. She just calls me. She's like, I can't not come up with ideas immediately when I get your text. I'm like, oh, I know. That's exactly why I texted you. So we were already generating all kinds of ideas. So stay tuned for all the fun ways that we're going to be doing some fun giveaways in the month of December to celebrate my birthday and really this kind of rebirth, because I just came back from our second inner child healing retreat, and oh my gosh, it was life-changing. And the theme of it was rebirth. And I absolutely got everything I needed out of that trip myself. But to see what the other women got out of it was, talk about filling your cup. I feel like my cup is filled for the next several years just based on that one. And so we are going to have an episode with just them to be able to share their experience. And so stay tuned for that as well, because we do have a special announcement for those of you listening. You get the insider scoop that we already have the next retreat on the calendar. And so it is going to be April 9th through the 13th, I believe. And I cannot wait, because the tweaks that we made to this last one were everything. The first one was incredible and amazing. Adding the birthing cave experience to this retreat was next level. Absolutely next level for the woman in us. We tended to our inner child. We did a lot of work with our inner child, but for so many of us, and those of you that are listening that are women, there are a lot of parts of you that you have neglected, abandoned, forgotten about, silenced, all of those things. And this was a really, really powerful opportunity to tap back into her energy and bring her back to life. And that's what I definitely did. And I witnessed the other woman doing it as well. So, but I'm also connecting with some coaches for you men out there that are listening that I'm really excited to expose you to. Not that I don't love doing this kind of work with men as well, but even in terms of retreats and things like that, having that kind of community and being vulnerable with other people is so powerful. It's so powerful. And so I'm really excited about who's kind of been coming into my world because yeah, I feel like I'm really finding my tribe right now, and that feels really good. So I'm excited to bring more of those people to all of you to listen to. So anyway, I think that is it for my updates. I'll save that one for later. So stay tuned because there's lots of really fun things coming your way. But so today, again, I wanted to talk about why the holidays aren't always so happy, right? And I think that's part of it is for a lot of people, they aren't. They feel like they should be. And it becomes this weird, like, well, I should be excited about this family gathering. I should be excited about Christmas. I should be excited about Thanksgiving. And you can start to feel kind of guilty that you don't, when really it's because they're so triggering. It can be incredibly triggering. And I alluded to this a little bit on last week's episode, about my friend who was like super successful, but every time she'd go home, she kind of had to play this role. And that can be part of it, but there are so many things. And this is where, when we think we can bypass our healing and ignore our childhood wounds, holidays are when that Band-Aid kind of gets ripped off. And all of a sudden you are triggered up the you-know-what, and you end up feeling super stressed on the holidays. You end up maybe gaining weight over the holidays. You end up drinking more. Like all of your healthy habits that you've established throughout the rest of the year are gone to the wayside, because life has imploded. But there's also just this like really underlying stress that we're not actually acknowledging the real reason behind it. And, if you've been listening for a while, a lot of the stories on here, people didn't have the greatest childhoods. And so, I was actually even talking to some friends at the gym this week about, like Christmas and things like that. And like my favorite thing was to play with the boxes. It's like you got that box and you made it your bed for the next 2 weeks. It was the best. So like I have fun memories like that, but I also know that, like my parents worked really hard to provide for me and my 3 older sisters, but it wasn't that there was a ton of money to buy a ton of toys and things like that. And so you kind of knew you better make the most out of that box and maybe the couple things that you were able to get. And so, I feel that showing up in other aspects of my life. I've talked on here about my cracked computer screen or my gym tennis shoes that, I should have replaced a long time ago, but it's like, well, they're still shoes and they still have somewhat of a sole on the bottom. I can wear them until they're completely trash. And I know that's where that comes from, is because asking for things made me feel like a burden. I never wanted to burden my parents because I already knew how hard they were trying. And I knew that they were already doing everything that they could for us. And so I didn't want to ask for things. But I remember what it was like going back to school after Christmas break, knowing that everyone was going to have like all their new clothes and new cool things. And your list was a little shorter, and that just brought up some emotion. So it's stuff like that can emerge for people, or the holidays might have been triggering for, your family members. Maybe it was your parents getting together with their siblings or with their parents, and you're a little kid and you're noticing a lot of fighting around the holidays. You're like, wait, I thought it was supposed to be happy holidays, and as a kid, it's kind of confusing, right? Like you're very excited and you're into the moment and all of those things. And then there's just a lot of tension. And as a kid, you're very intuitive and you pick up on that. And so it can be really confusing. You can start to associate things like holidays and family gatherings as something that doesn't feel good. And knowing now, maybe as an adult, even though maybe the situations are changed and people have grown or not, that it can still be very triggering going into that, because somewhere programmed inside of you, you're anticipating, Uncle Jimmy to say something inappropriate or to make, a racist comment or a political joke or something where everyone's just like, oh, or there's so many examples that I have for this episode. People making comments about food and your weight or your job and just like projecting. It's a lot of that. And so as much as I can use this episode to kind of help you mentally, emotionally, and maybe even physically prepare in some ways when it comes to nutrition and all those things, and just the way that we can tend to ourselves and to our physical body, can really be helpful. And so I will do my best. As again, I am winging it as always. I was like, oh, I'll pull up some little notes so I have some examples so I don't forget. And I was like, no, don't even look at them. Don't even look at them. So I'm likely going to forget something that I wrote, but that's fine. That's fine because I know that I do much better when I just let her rip. So you guys are like, really, Tammy? Because maybe you should try it the other way. Anyway, so also, while I was debating whether to share this story now or after the food stuff, but I'll just jump into it now because with Thanksgiving literally right around the corner, I remembered what Thanksgiving was like for me last year and talk about triggering. And this time it had nothing to do with the food because I've really reined that in, and I'll talk a lot about that with non-negotiables and these kinds of things. But this last year was triggering for many, 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 many different reasons. And because I'm pretty open on here, again, if you're a first time listener, welcome to the very deep parts of my life in that I'm going through a separation. And last Thanksgiving was the very first time that he did not join us in 18 years. And while felt like I was emotionally prepared for that, he was invited and it was all good. And it was like, you're welcome to come. But I understood, why I didn't want to do that or needed, to set some of those boundaries. Totally understood that. And so I remember picking up the kids that morning to take them back to my families. And I could start to feel like, ooh, I need to hold space for them because this is going to be the first holiday that their dad isn't there. And while I thought I was okay with it, I didn't realize how much I was holding energy for everybody. Because even when we got to Thanksgiving, it was like the elephant in the room, right? We all knew so-and-so isn't here this year. And I now understand at the time, I just wanted someone to ask and say hey, how are you doing? And a few people did. And and I understand you're in that situation, you're not going to dive deep into things. And so there's a lot of moving parts to that, but it was also really hard because I didn't realize how much energy I was putting out to try to hold this all together and make sure that my kids were okay and that they were going to be emotionally safe and all these things and knowing how other people were going to feel. And so I'm taking on it all. Right. And thought I was doing a pretty good job. And until Arlo had a little meltdown, not a little one. It was probably the biggest meltdown he's ever had. And now, I understand it too, right? Because his little body and brain and ego didn't necessarily know what was going on either. And so even though he might not have been able to communicate what he was feeling and understand why, maybe there was some sadness there that his dad wasn't there, why is everyone else here and he's not, and this was a recipe for disaster. So if you have young kids, if they are tired, hungry, and hot and sweaty, they're just got done playing. Yeah. Don't have them do a craft. Okay. Just don't have them do an adult craft where they have to tie knots because it was not a good situation. And so those three things, right? A tired kid, a hungry kid, and a kid that's just, exhausted and hot and over all those things. It was a recipe for disaster, just waiting to pull the trigger. Well, doing this craft definitely did that. And I could see him slowly starting to get agitated. And then it was and he was gone. So I witnessed Arlo completely dissociating. He full on turned into Hulk and there was no rationalizing with him. I didn't even know how to get him back, just because you could tell in his eyes, he was not there. Arlo was somewhere else. And I remember at one point having to remove him from the table and take him into one of my nieces, her bedroom, just to sit on the floor. And I just remember sitting in front of this door, doing everything I could to keep it together, right? Because I'm trying to be there for my son. And I just feel all of it. I feel all of everything that I was holding on the earlier part of the day, just starting to crumble. Shit. I can't keep this together, but I have to for him. And I'm trying to, hold space for him. I'm closing my eyes. I'm sitting on the floor as, he's trying to bust through me to get back through the door. And there's nothing worse than barricading your kid in a room just so he can calm down. Everything about it was awful. And so I'm closing my eyes, I'm taking deep breaths, and I am just trying to send him any positive energy, just trying to clear the energy, anything I could do, because I had tried everything. Like, he was so far gone. I was like, I don't know what else to do besides just close my eyes and just send out loving energy. Eventually he calms down. We're able to go back out to the table, and now I'm like on eggshells, right? And I can just feel, again, being an empath, and also just in my head, my ego is now creating stories about what everyone is thinking about what just happened with me and Arlo. And that was my own stuff. And now I know that, like, I don't hold anything against anybody, you know? But that's hard for people to also witness a kid having a complete meltdown, you know, and there's all these things that you want to do to try to step in, but you really can't. And so it's just it's an awful situation for everybody. But my ego created all these stories. Like, everyone's looking at you, everyone's judging you as a mom, and, you know, look what you've done. Like, you ruined Thanksgiving. And all of a sudden I remember, like, I had to turn because I felt the tears coming, and I was like, shit, I'm not gonna be able to stop these. And so I get up from the table and I'm like, oh no, I'm not stopping them. And I had to leave. And I grabbed a stocking cap. It had to be my niece's stocking cap, which I then wanted to keep because it was really cute. Threw on my coat, and I just took off walking outside. And it turns out one of my sisters did come and, like, yell my name. I did not hear anything. And I just remember thinking, like, is this what a panic attack feels like? And that's literally the only way I can describe it. I mean, now I know, like, emotional regulation and all of those things, but that's what it felt like, is that I could not catch my breath. I was just hyperventilating. I was crying, and I was just doing everything I could to hold on to some sense of self and safety. But in that moment, wow, I've never experienced anything I've never ever experienced anything like that in my life. And I just kept walking and walking. And luckily my sister lived in town, and just a little past that was almost kind of like a little open area of nature. And so that's where I was being called to, because that's my thing. And, like, once I got out to this field, I remember having this moment where I turned around to look, and it was I don't want to say craziest experience. It was really kind of the coolest experience. And now I know why this all happened. But I turned around as if I was my inner child, like that little girl seeing if anyone came to see if she was okay. And as soon as I saw that no one was coming after me, the most beautiful thing was I immediately was like, I got you. Like, I got you, Tam Tam. I am here. Big T, Tammy, I'm here. You know, I didn't need any of them to come and support me and to see if I was okay. Like, I can do that for me now. I was that person for her in that moment. And I know that's why that happened, because that was a very, like, whoa, to, again, show me my level of growth, but also that whole experience, and that the crying that I was doing, that was like, it was purging. Like, I'm done feeling this way. Like, I'm done sweeping things under the rug. I was really kind of fed up with some of these, like, old dynamics and these old patterns, and just not being able to be open and authentic. And that I had to, like, bottle all of these big emotions up this entire day. And that was what came out. So sometimes when it feels like you're losing control, it's literally like, it could be reframe that. And for me, it was like getting rid of everything that didn't feel good. And I needed to shed all of that and kind of declare in that moment that this is not how I roll. Like, I want to be open and authentic and, you know, have deep, meaningful conversations in moments like this. But recognizing that I can be that for me. And that was a really powerful moment to know that I got you, Tam Tam. And I did. And I calmed myself back down and went back into the house and was able to have an enjoyable time. And the best part about that was, after that, like, Arlo and I went out and played football, and it was so joyful. There was so much peace. There was so much love. And I just felt so connected to him because I understood what he was going through. Because I went through it, and here I'm expecting at the time, he was 5. Like, how would I expect him to process and feel all of those emotions when it was even hard for me? And so like, just recognizing that, like, I probably could have had conversations ahead of time. We just kind of went into it like, I was almost doing that same thing, like acting like everything was fine and not addressing the fact that, hey, I get it. Like, today might be hard that your dad's not here. I could have done that ahead of time and had those conversations, and who knows if it would have been different, but I know that I'm much more comfortable talking about those things now. And the reason I wasn't was because here I'm thinking I don't want to make them uncomfortable or them sad, but really that was a me thing, right? Like, I don't want to feel comfortable and I don't want to. So now I have those conversations with them because I can sit in the discomfort of it, knowing that it is going to be helpful for them. And so however that story resonates with you, it's just really like, how can you support yourself going into the holidays? And if you take anything from that, is allow yourself to feel your feelings. Take some time before you make that drive and go visit family to really spend some time with you. Maybe you go out for a walk that morning and you help clear your energy then, or, if it's going to be triggering, maybe there's a friend you can talk to, or if you have a sibling that you trust. There are lots of things that I could have done differently to prepare myself that morning, because as much as I was, I think, angry and frustrated that it felt like we were just sweeping everything under the rug, I kind of did that same thing going in. And I didn't recognize that until later, is that I was kind of doing that with myself and with the kids, thinking like, okay, like, it's going to be good. And then when all of a sudden it wasn't, I was like, oh, oh. But yeah, so hoping for a different experience. This Thanksgiving, we've come a long way. We really have. Kids, everybody, the whole situation. So I'm actually looking forward to that. Whereas before, it would have been incredibly triggering going back and thinking I would fall back into those same habits and patterns. But I know how to support myself emotionally now, and know that maybe I need to get outside for a post-turkey walk, before all of those things are just ways that I can continuously clear my energy throughout the day. And that's kind of part of today's episode as well, of just what are the things that you can do to support yourself, again, not just nutritionally, physically, emotionally. We'll get to that stuff at the end here, but I'll shift gears here a little bit into the food portion of things, because again, I know that's real. And why I said I can't just talk about food without talking about the other things is because I know that I used food to numb any discomfort. And sometimes too, when you kind of grew up, when maybe there wasn't a lot available, sometimes when there's a lot of food around, you, for whatever reason, like, you don't need all of that. You're not hungry for all of that, but there's still this impulse like, well, if I don't eat it all now, I'll never get it again. And that's really common, whether you didn't have a lot growing up as a kid or you have been on that cycle of dieting for many, many years. And I played that game so many times where I would restrict myself so much. Well, you can't have this, you can't have that. Well, then when there was a moment of vulnerability or there was a holiday, I was like, well, fuck it. I'm going to eat all of it. I'll polish off this pumpkin pie by myself and hope no one notices. Or I will go in another room and definitely have done that, try to eat, or when there was no one else around, I'd, be putting stuff in my mouth. And so that is really important to acknowledge as well. Like, what are some of those impulses? And like, if you're coming in like super duper restrictive, your ego can have that moment of vulnerability where there's that restrictive part that's driving the bus for a long time. Well, now it's a holiday and that rebellious part of you is like, all right, like, it's time to party. Let's go. Let's eat all the things. So let's stuff ourselves so we can't even walk and we don't even feel good, but it's going to be totally worth it. But it's actually not, the cycle I'm talking about. And it's interesting that we can have our own stuff going into the holidays, right? Especially if we've been on that like all or nothing cycle before, but also other people's comments, right? And this is where it's good to, as much as I don't like things scripted, to kind of have some key phrases in your back pocket for when, Aunt Susie's like, aren't you going to eat more pumpkin pie or don't you want more mashed potatoes? And you're like, no, I'm good. Oh, come on. I thought you loved me, and want to put on more. I don't know, again, where that voice came from. Sorry. But sometimes the pressure to eat certain foods, the pressure to try certain things. And you're like, I don't want that. Like, so I've been gluten-free for, I don't know, over 10 years. And sometimes there can be pressure to try something that would be not gluten-free. And I know there were times where I was like, oh, fine. Like the people pleaser me was like, whatever, I'll just try this, make them happy. And then I was paying the consequences for it. Like, no, what are you doing? And so, or thinking about alcohol, right? Like that goes, there was going to do like a whole other section on alcohol, but I might as well bring it into this now. In that a lot of people project about food. And I knew this as a dietitian. Oh my gosh. People would look at my plate and judge it, but then make a comment about theirs and what I must be thinking about their plate. And I was like, hold up. Like, I'm not the food police here. Like, freedom within boundaries, people. And I'll explain that here in a second. Those of you that are previous Fiercely Focused graduates, I know some of you are that are listeners, you know all about the freedom within boundaries, but that is my favorite approach. And I use it literally every day. But sometimes, again, that pressure or the projections are what are really hard. Or someone might make a comment about how much you're eating, or they might make a comment about your weight. Like, oh, it looks like you put on a few pounds since last Christmas or last Thanksgiving. Really? Thanks, Grandma. Like I didn't notice that. But what do you say? What do you say in those moments? Like you freeze. And this is where I'm talking about having some sort of phrase or line ready if you know that you have people in your life that make those kind of comments. And I don't want to project that onto them or manifest that they're going to do that, but it is good to kind of know what you're going to say because, again, as a people pleaser, I am more likely to just laugh it off or do the thing that they want me to do versus kind of stand my ground or to have something to come back and say. Or I'm really good at that. Like, oh man, I think of it like 10 minutes later, like, oh, I wish I would have said that, because ego freezes me. Like I go into freeze in those moments where I don't know what to say in the moment. And again, now it's much easier, but it was something, it's like a muscle, like it's going to take practice to build that up because like setting those boundaries can be really hard. And so again, when we're thinking about comments about food or alcohol and, if someone's like, oh, aren't you going to try that? Like, it looks really good, but I've got what I need here. Thanks though. You're like, oh, do you want any more food? Like you should really eat some more. I'm like, tummy's feeling good. Like maybe I'll come back for seconds later, whether you do or not, so sometimes it's like a deflection of like, I can say this just to like back off, and then hopefully they don't notice later, but maybe they do. And what are you going to say? What are you going to do? And so I think that's really important because as much as you think we know by now not to comment about people's bodies and what people are eating, it happens all the time still. I'm sorry. And if I could like create a clip of this and saying, hey, everybody, how about the best gift you give people for the holidays is to not make comments about, what they're eating and their bodies. And be like, then you can just play the clip on your phone at the thing. And they're like, oh, sorry, I couldn't turn my phone off quick enough. Sorry, must have heard Tammy's little reel. Hope you heard it. So maybe I'll do that for you. But truly, you kind of have to prepare for those situations, especially if you are trying to make changes, because in this is starting to go into, these old family roles and these old family dynamics. And if you're now someone who's making health changes, oh, trying to be different, you think you're better than everybody, or like, oh, getting healthier. And that's people's projections, right? Because they're not doing those things. And so by you doing them, it makes them feel bad, but they'd rather make you feel bad or uncomfortable because then it makes them feel better. That is all that is. And if you can become a professional, like projection detector, that does not roll off the tongue. Oh my gosh, it'll save you so much. I was just talking to someone earlier about like Aria going into middle school next year, and as like nerve wracking as that is, like I actually feel pretty confident right now in that she knows when people are projecting onto her. And I was like, oh, like if if she can get that down before middle school, whoo, I mean, that doesn't necessarily make it easier, but she can know like that's not about me. That's a you thing. So remembering that your inner child will likely feel very triggered. Ego will want to swoop in and either snap and, maybe you say something that is now going to be hurtful. We talked about it on last week's episode, how it's really important to make sure that when you are speaking a need, that it comes through your heart and not through your ego. Because it comes to your ego, that's when all of a sudden you got family members yelling at each other or feelings getting hurt and now you're not talking anymore. You don't want those things to happen, but it's crazy how common they are at family things. Because what we don't recognize is, yes, while we're family, we also have a lot of wounds. We have a lot of baggage with each other. We have a lot of people have a lot of dysfunction in their family that no one is talking about. But if you are the one, like, kind of seeing it now and not having it anymore, not everyone's going to be cool with that. And so learning how to navigate that and protect your boundaries and your peace and all of those things are really important. So if you haven't listened to last week's episode yet on reclaiming your power, I would definitely do that on your drive to wherever you're going while you're baking that turkey. Pop that old Tami Talks on and listen to that. But yeah, so the food stuff is tricky, but what I want people to really think about going into it is set some intentions as well, right? And I know that I've done this before. I've gone in with the best of intentions, like I'm not going to overeat. I'm not going to overeat. And I go in there and what do? I overeat. But now I know it's because I was triggered. And if I can already start to think about the things that might trigger me, I can come up with a plan of how to support myself. So that way, again, I'm already equipped to know how to support myself in that moment. Because again, food was always the go-to for me. And oftentimes, because there is underlying stress and tension and you're walking on eggshells, it's really easy for people in that situation, especially Thanksgiving, to just keep eating, right? We just keep eating, we just keep drinking, because then we don't have to actually feel any of the feelings. We don't have to address them because now we're distracted. And there's a lot with that, but when we can really recognize, again, like I know that I'm done and I'm full. I'm past, I used to talk about my hunger scale all the time, and if I was 7, I was good. I was satisfied. I wasn't full, but I wasn't still hungry. I was right in that like satisfied. And I'd always kind of see myself on this teeter totter, like if I have this last few bites of stuffing, is that going to tip me over into 8 where all of a sudden now I'm full? I can ask myself those things now and give an honest answer. Whereas before, I just zoomed right into misery zone, full speed ahead and call it the danger zone, right? Like danger zone. That's where I would go because I never gave myself time to pause and to actually ask and check in with my body, with my emotions on how I was feeling, right? I was just on autopilot. My ego was driving the bus and said, whatever it takes to not feel a damn thing today, let's do that. And for me, that was food. Or even, back in the day, it was alcohol too. I would certainly drink at family things. And so now I know how I want to feel physically, emotionally, energetically, all of those things. And so now I'm kind of thinking about what do I need to have in place to do those things. And my favorite tool when I'm talking in terms of nutritionally and physically is what I call like the freedom within boundaries plate. And I don't have a pretty picture to show all of you. Use your imaginations. It's a circle. It's a plate. And if you were to draw a line down half of that plate, divide it in half of that I use for vegetables. So my non-starchy vegetables. So I'm bringing Brussels sprouts to Thanksgiving because I want to make sure I have a vegetable. One of my other sisters always brings a salad. So I know easy peasy, half a plate of vegetables, boom. Well, if I take the other half and I divide that in half, so now I've got a quarter and a quarter. A quarter of that is for my protein. So I'm loading up with turkey right there. And the other quarter is for whatever carbohydrate I want. And this is where it gets tricky. And I'm not saying you have to follow this, but this has worked for me for many, 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 many years now. Whereas food was, I don't even know what to say. Like if you've listened to these podcasts, you know that I've had a very complicated relationship with food for most of my life. And so I can certainly have days and examples like Thanksgiving where I don't need to follow this, but I love following this because it kind of keeps me in control. And this is why I love this, is because that restrictive part that ran the show for so long for me, it likes that there's boundaries, right? I can have whatever I want. I can have that carbohydrate section. It can be mashed potatoes. It could be stuffing. It could be a pumpkin pie. It could be a dinner roll. It could be, maybe a combination of a couple of those, as long as it's within a quarter of that plate. And I know some of you are like, well, how big the plate, Tami? I know what you're up to. I see what little games and tricks you're trying to play. A normal size plate. Although I do like those big oval ones. And that might be where, I maybe am increasing my portions a little bit, but I'm still keeping it within the boundaries. Maybe that's the little exception that I make. But I know, I get to choose, what do I want most? Because oftentimes, you go to holidays and again, we're in autopilot. Well, of course you got to have a dinner roll and I need mashed potatoes. Well, and I'm going to have stuffing too. And of course I'm having pumpkin pie, but do you really want all of those? Do they all sound really good to you, or is it just because it's what you do? Right? When everyone's passing things around, is it just habit? Is it just that, well, if I don't take it, then someone's going to get offended? Right? If I don't try Aunt Susie's green bean casserole or something, is she going to get offended? That's again where we're going to talk about people pleasing and boundaries. But you get to choose what you want there. And so your restrictive part loves that there's boundaries. It's not going to be a free for all for Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever holiday parties you go to. But your rebellious part loves that you can choose whatever the hell you want in there. So if I want pumpkin pie in there for my carb, oh, hell yeah, I'm going to do that and I'm going to enjoy it. And that's actually what I usually do. Because I'm not a potato person. My good friend Erica, you guys have seen her on this podcast. She makes the most amazing gluten-free dinner rolls. Otherwise, I could give two shits about dinner rolls. But hers, they're good. So I'm very excited for her gluten-free baked goods that she's going to be giving me. Erica, if you're listening anytime now, would be great. But that I would make room for because they're really good. And that's not something I generally have a lot, right? Because some people, it's I can eat a dinner roll any freaking day of the week. Why would I also need that? Save room for the things you don't always have, right? You don't always have pumpkin pie or whatever pie, or whatever carbohydrate that's it is really only a Thanksgiving thing. Do that then. Why are you wasting time and space on mashed potatoes that you could have any day of the week, or a dinner? But again, you do you, because some people, that is your thing. I know a lot of people where it's oh my gosh, a dinner roll, on Thanksgiving, that might be your thing. You might love mashed potatoes. So awesome. Love them then and enjoy them then and release any guilt or shame about eating them. That's what pisses me off is make the choice to eat it and then release the guilt around it, because I now know energetically how you feel when you eat something matters. And I'm not talking just about digestively. I mean energetically. And I don't know if I've shared this full story on here, but so one of my older sisters, and she was, kind of the tall and lean when I talked about her in episode 1. And how she could always eat dessert after supper and was never gained weight. And it was always this big thing, right? Well, I'm I can't do that. Must be nice. And still she would always have a little piece of chocolate after lunch and supper. And again, I thought well, must be nice for her. But I recognized my energy around it is every time I did something like that, I brought all this guilt and shame with me. And guess what? That weighs 1,000,000 freaking pounds. And so what do you know? I would manifest that physically in pounds that I didn't want. Even though I was probably working out more because I knew I was eating more, it didn't matter. Even if I was eating all these other healthy things, that weight gain was coming out because I was always bringing guilt and shame to the table. And I will no longer do that. So if I'm going to have pumpkin pie, I'm going to do it, I'm going to own it, and I'm going to enjoy the hell out of it. And I'm not bringing that to the table anymore. So take ownership of your choices and really sit with what you want. Get out of autopilot around the holidays and really think about, what is it that I really want? What does bring me joy, because food can be that. Sometimes we try to take all of the joy and things out of food, but there can still be that aspect, right? Like if someone is going to bring, it's Christmas time, you got, oh my gosh, she makes the most amazing Christmas cookies. Like plan it in rather than, having this big meal and then eating all of those because you're never going to eat them again. And tomorrow I'll start, or New Year's will come, and like, and you know why? You can tell I'm getting a little fired up here. Because I've been there so many times and I know how frustrating it is. And this is not the kind of stress we need around the holidays, especially when there are these other bigger, deeper things going on in our lives. But here is what I see as one of the bigger issues is, one, when you think about our energy around the food we eat, that plays a big role in it. And so when you're at family things and you are feeling all this tension or anger or whatever, and you're eating because of that, like, check yourself, give yourself a moment before you sit down at the table. Maybe you just step outside on the front porch and like take a deep breath and try to clear your energy. We kind of talked about that on last week's episode, of just these little things that you can do to relieve some of that, because the last thing you want to do is go into that meal with all of this suppressed emotions and things, because it is going to dictate how fast you eat, how much you eat, right? If you're like feeling angry and you're frustrated and you're just like, oh, I can't believe she said that, you're eating so fast, you're not even paying attention. And they say it takes 20 minutes for that little choo-choo train to go from your stomach to your brain. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I'm full, because you ate so freaking fast, right? Because it's like, I need to hurry up and get up. I don't want to be on this table. Okay. Like, this is where we need to learn how to emotionally regulate ourselves. So if you can ask Santa for anything this year, ask for emotional regulation. That's what I'm asking for me and my kids. But yeah, so really check yourself. How do you feel physically before you sit down and eat? How do you feel emotionally? Are you feeling tense? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling anger? Are you feeling happy? Are you joyful? Okay, cool. But just take a little note. It's not like you have to sit down and meditate about it. It can literally be a second. It can be as you're walking through, filling up your plate, to just be like, I'm just going to check in on how I'm feeling. Do a quick little self-assessment. That will do wonders for you. And then if you are able to stay within the parameters you set, awesome, cool. And if not, awesome, cool. Reflect on that. Ask yourself why. Stop beating yourself up. That does nothing for you but keep you on the shame cycle. And that is just a snowball effect. So own it. If you overeat and like, oh, I can't believe I did this again. Okay, have that moment. And then why? Why did I overeat? Oh my gosh, it's because, my mom asked me about how work was going, even though she knows that it's been really stressful, and was just prying and, overstepping her boundaries and like making me seem like an idiot in front of my siblings and da-da-da-da-da. Well, there you go. Boom. It wasn't about the food. So often, people's stories and issues around weight around the holidays has nothing to do with the food. We blame the food. Yes, I know there's more of it and there's more fun things, but that is not the underlying reason why we struggle with weight throughout the holidays. It is because of all the shit that gets turned up and put on a platter for us. Like, here's all those childhood wounds you've been ignoring all year. Thought I'd bring those back and wrap those up pretty nice for you and put them under the tree. Which we now know, yes, those are gifts. Ha. See what I did there? You're welcome. Right? They are gifts if you actually look at them and learn from them and heal from them. Yeah, it's that gift wrapped in that painful package. But yeah, there is a lot of them under the tree. And if you're not prepared for them and they get opened up when you're not ready, here you go. And that's the last place you want to process or feel triggered, is in front of your family. Like me at Thanksgiving and having a complete meltdown. I'm using air quotes because I don't see it as that. It was the breakdown I needed before the breakthrough. I will reframe anything into a positive. I will find a way. And I don't see it as toxic positivity, because I learn from the things. I sit in the shit and I work through it. And then I'm able to find the blessing in the lesson. If I were to just bypass that and just try to find the positive right away, like that's different. So you have to allow yourself to really like, whoa, what happened there? And I learned a lot from that when I sat with and reflected why that happened to me last year. So again, coming back to this whole freedom within boundaries thing before I move on, is it can be a really, really empowering tool because it allows you to be in the driver's seat. Like that is the whole point, is how do you stay in the driver's seat around the holidays? Because it's going to be very easy. Ego is like on guard. It's hovering, it's like your kids that are like leaning up as you're driving and just like, yeah, sit back down, like, get your seatbelt on. That's kind of what ego is doing. They're like, they're ready because they know we're going into like a landmine of triggers because of all the things people are going to say or not say, right? Like last year of just like crickets, and that being triggering in itself. So ego is going to be on high guard, high alert for a lot of you going into the holidays because it already knows, it remembers. Your inner child remembers what it was like to not feel seen by your older sibling. It knows what it feels like to not be heard when you were talked over. It knows what it feels like to have set a boundary and people completely disregard it. Your inner child remembers all of that. It remembers what it was like to be lied to. Maybe it was about Santa, maybe about other things. Like that's no joke, right? For kids in those situations, like that could be something that like they held this belief and they trusted you. And depending on how they found out, like this is real. And I know we can brush it off and laugh about it, but that is like a betrayal wound and it can start there. So be mindful of that come Christmas time and how your kids might find out about Santa. If that's something that you and your family celebrate or get into, you have to be really careful with that. And we were just talking about, I don't know, it was like TikTok or it was these reels going around where people were cracking eggs on kids' heads or like throwing slices of cheese at them. And while first glance, it's really funny, right? And I can certainly myself was like, haha. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, no. Because you could see the look in these kids' eyes. They're like, what are you doing? Like, you're my mom. Like, why did you crack an egg on my head? There's just that little bit of question. Like, why would you do that to me? Like, what are you doing? That just creates that little bit of question, a little bit of distrust. And I'm not joking. Like, it can start with little things like that. And then they, as parents, we tell little white lies all the time. Like, oh, we can't go because so-and-so, we just try to, well, when those things get found out, that betrayal wound becomes bigger and bigger. And then it gets into bigger and bigger things where as an adult, like we don't trust anyone, right? So I don't say that jokingly about the whole Santa thing, that we do need to be careful about that. So where was I? Sorry. I'm talking about the bus and ego and how this plate helps you stay in the driver's seat because you're making conscious choices, right? You're not on autopilot. You are driving, you're saying, okay, I'm going through the line. And maybe another great tip is survey, right? The table. Know what's going to be there. You generally know. If you're going to a family thing, most people are kind of talking about what's going to be there, or you already know. So you can already kind of have a game plan, but if it's, it might be new things there and it's kind of like a buffet style and you go through and you serve yourself, go look through it before. So you already know what's there and you already know what you really want versus like, oh, I'm going to take this and oh shoot, I want that. Oh, I don't have any room for that, but I want this too. And pretty soon you've got like a heaping pile of carbohydrate when really it's like, is that really a quarter section? We're like, well, you didn't say how high it could go, Tami. See, I see. I know the loopholes you're already trying to get in the bigger plate, the going up with the quarter section of the plate. I know. Trust me. I know because I've done it. So that can also help. That keeps you in the driver's seat. You get to make conscious choices. And then again, if you veer off on that, own it. Own it, learn from it, move on. Okay? And leave it there. Leave it there. Again, clear your energy. You're not taking that home with you and then feeling guilty and then hopping on the treadmill to burn off all the things that, no. I mean, do that if it feels good, but not out of punishment, not out of self-hate. Trust me, I was a professional at that. So that's why I love the plate so much because it helps me feel empowered about my choices and I'm not on autopilot. And, with drinking and all of those things, there's things with that too, right? That's a very easy way for people to kind of calm themselves because, of all of the anxious feelings, the eggshell feelings being around family, or just the small talk that's uncomfortable. So we'll drink to avoid any discomfort, right? Because it's easier for me to talk to, I don't know why I'm sorry if there's an Aunt Betty or Susie out there. I don't know why I keep using your name. Uncle Ted. Like, oh, I got to have these uncomfortable conversations. Like, I should probably either get drunk or get high. I don't know, because I don't want to deal with it. But like, I mean, again, no joke. Sometimes we do that without realizing why we're really doing that. Next thing we know, like, maybe we're drunk at a family thing, or maybe that's just because what everybody is doing. And now it's weird that you're not doing that. And you might feel a lot of pressure around drinking. You know, I mentioned on last week's podcast, like I haven't drank in 2 years, and I have no judgment for anyone that's going to be drinking on Thanksgiving. I'm just not. And I don't ever feel pressure from them to drink, but I know for a while there I did. But now I think back and I'm like, was it because I was projecting? Yeah, likely. Because now I know what I would say. Like if someone were to pressure me, like, I'm good. Like I'm fine. And I know how I want to feel that next day. And that's way more worth it to me. And so it's not an issue for me to turn that down but sometimes, you know, there's been other times where I've been at places and it's kind of been relentless, like continually offering things. But again, I now know it's like, this is a you thing. Like this is making you uncomfortable that I'm not drinking. Like, okay. So again, if you can recognize how often people are projecting throughout the holidays, you will not carry that with you. And that can be super duper duper helpful. So those are some things around food, but I also will touch on what I referred to earlier as non-negotiables. And this was a game changer for me. And actually, I also talked about last week's episode. So I'm sorry, if you haven't watched it yet, you have to, because none of this episode is going to make sense. Just kidding. I had mentioned how impactful my father-in-law was to me, and losing him to suicide the summer of 2017. It was in that moment and going there and, you know, trying to kind of take care of everyone, write the obituary, put together the picture boards, and like make sure Aria was okay. Arlo wasn't born yet. And doing all of these things, it was the first time in my life that I didn't abandon me. Because, and I know some of you watching, you know, when you go into full on caretaker mode, all of your needs go to the wayside. You drop everything for everyone. And while it is a beautiful quality of you, your inner child feels very left out and abandoned by you. And I didn't know about inner child work then, but now I understand why this was so significant to me. And I just called it my non-negotiables, when really I know I was reparenting myself. I didn't abandon myself in that moment. So what I did, again, not knowing, is that when we got that phone call that Wednesday night, late at night, packing up, I threw in my shakes. I threw in my tennis shoes. I threw in the stuff I used to intermittent fast, like not even thinking. It was just who I was at that point. That was just how I lived my life. And so I packed those things. I packed my workout clothes. And so when I got there, you know, in the mornings, I would go for a run. And that was when I could clear my energy. And that's when, again, I felt so connected to him, even in that moment of just being, you know, running through that town and getting out into the fields and just having nature nurture me in that moment when I needed it, because I was pouring into so many other people at that time. Like that was the way that I was pouring back into me, and I let like Mother Nature do that. So going for those runs in the morning was super important, and in a way to clear my energy. Again, I didn't know any of this then. I didn't talk energy at this point. I knew I liked being outside, but I didn't know why. All of that stuff. I didn't know about emotional regulation. I didn't know about any of this. I just was intuitively doing it. And when it came to nutritionally, when I had those 2 shakes every day, again, because there was a lot of people bringing food, right? And it would have been really easy for me to just go off the handles. And for someone who was an emotional binge eater, that would have been a really easy time to go right back into those old habits and eat to numb all of the feelings that I was feeling. Because trust me, I was feeling a lot of them. And I didn't do that because I was following this plate. I followed the Freedom Within Boundaries plate. I had my 2 shakes in between. And so I was nourishing my physical body because I was expending a lot of energy emotionally and energetically for people. Like I had to take care of me. I had to pour into myself in order to take care of other people. But in the past, I would have let all of that go to the wayside thinking I have to take care of everyone else. So I don't have time to take care of me. And that is bullshit. That is not true. Those are old stories. And if you want to get past that hurdle, you've got to lock into that and you've got to realize that. And I hope that if you are listening to this, like that's setting in with you, or if you've been listening to several of these episodes, you're getting that and you start to feel that and you're honoring that. It's like that's the best gift you can give people, is to take care of you. Because if I wouldn't have done that, I would have been no help to anyone during that time. And I'll never forget. So I had started, I think we had talked on one of the episodes, I think it was with Susan in the addiction episode. You know, we were both using the same supplements and there was this IsaBody challenge. And so every 16 weeks you take your before pictures. So I took my pictures like right before my father-in-law passed. And, you know, then it was all throughout the summer. And the summer, like, I like routine. If you know me, you know I'm like a massive creature of habit. Again, really only between the hours of 3:15 and 10 a.m. And then the rest of the day is like whatever. But when it comes to that, like I am pretty routine about things, even like the way I eat now. And so for us to be here, there, and everywhere and out of my element and, you know, not at my normal gym and all these things like that normally would have sent me on a tizzy. But because I had these things like locked in and these non-negotiables and was taking care of myself, I remember having to take my pictures in August. And I remember looking at and I'm thinking like, luckily it was just, you just needed to submit your progress pictures. But I went into it thinking like, I don't even want to look back at these other ones, you know, from April, because I know what had happened. There was a lot of traveling. There was a lot of things in there. And I remember looking at it, I'm like, what the hell? What the hell just happened here? Like I was the leanest I had been, but like healthy. And that was like, I could start to see some of my abs. Like I was, and I had this confidence. Like I didn't look like I just had the summer that I had. Like there was a different energy about me. And it was because I took care of myself. And I will never forget looking at those pictures, knowing what had happened. And I always said when I had shared those pictures, if only people knew what happened, right? Because they could create this story like, oh, it's so easy for her to do this and, you know, have her muscles show and stuff. Like, you have no fucking idea how hard those 16 weeks were. But because I showed up for myself, my body said, thank you. My inner child said, thank you for not abandoning me. And that is what I think, personal opinion, is the root of why there's so much stress and tension and all this stuff throughout the holidays, is because we abandon ourselves, right? Because your schedule gets full of Christmas parties and you're shopping and you're wrapping and all of these things. It gets crazy, right? So that's part of it. But if you get so caught up in that you forget to take care of yourself, your inner child's going to get pissed, right? Because you've completely abandoned you. You forgot to take care of you. And so it's like, oh yeah, I'll get back to it after New Year's. You're like, no, your inner child's like, I need you to check in with me today. How are I feeling today? How am I feeling today? You don't get to take a day off. Your body doesn't get to take a day off. Your inner child's always there. So why we think that we can come in and out of that and then not pay the consequences? You do. And it's all, your inner child just wants, again, to feel seen and heard and be taken care of by you. And so how can you show up for yourself this holiday season? What is that going to look like? What is it going to look like physically, right? Are you going to commit to, you know what? I'm going to go for a walk before we, start Thanksgiving celebrations. I'm going to make sure that I'm keeping with my gym routine. Maybe it shifts a little bit. Maybe I don't need to go to the gym, but on those days where it's really busy, I'll still get in a little workout at home, or I'll, again, just go for a light little walk or something, or maybe I'll build it into my work day or something, right? Like if that's important to you, and if it isn't yet, maybe this seems like a terrible time to start, but it's actually a great time to start, is give yourself that gift. Give yourself that gift of committing to taking care of you. What does that look like nutritionally? If you're going to go out shopping all day, pack a freaking snack. Right? Don't leave it all up to chance. You don't know what is out there. You know the choices. No, you do. You know the choices that are out there. So we are literally setting ourselves up, and then we're going to get mad at ourselves for what we ate. And it just creates this vicious cycle. So take ownership of that. If I'm going to be out and about all day, I'm going to make sure I throw a protein bar in my purse, or I throw in some trail mix or something. I'll have something here to support myself. So that way, when we do sit down to eat, I am not now in the other side of the danger zone where I'm overly hungry, because I'm sorry. I have a master's degree in nutrition. And if I get into like 0 and 1 into my hunger, none of that knowledge is coming through. I'm eating fast. I'm eating all the stuff. There is no stopping until I feel like I need to be rolled out of the restaurant. Been there, done that. You have to be proactive to not let yourself get there. So be proactive in thinking about, what do I need to take with me? We're going to be out and about shopping all day. I can throw something in my purse. What about your water? Yes, for those of you, it's just going to take up my whole camera. For those of you on YouTube, my giant water bottle. And yes, I will take this with me everywhere I go. Because if I'm going to be out and about walking around all day, like my body still needs water. And I think about this, I don't know if I've shared this analogy on here before, but since we're going on the nutrition route, oh my gosh, I'm at an hour already. Oh boy. Okay. Sorry. But the way I think about water, and this is another one really important around the holiday times, because this is probably one of the first things to slip, but it is one of the most important things that needs to stay, is your water. And so I think about water as, let's say at 100 ounces, your body can function at 100% for you. So I'm just using the numbers, but honestly, really, most people should be somewhere between 80 and a gallon, 120, 128. And that depends on a lot of factors. So you do you, but let's say at 100 ounces every day, your body's like, I'm showing up 100% for you, baby. Let's do all this thing. Let's create new cells. Let's get this blood flowing. Let's build that lean muscle. Let's lose this body fat. Like, I'm feeling good. Let's do this. Let's make your skin glowing, right? Your body wants to do all of those things for you. And it can at 100% efficiency. But imagine you only get in 24 ounces of water that day. Think about this. You have now dialed down your body's efficiency to 24%. You still expect it to work at 100% for you. But you only dialed it to 24%. You see how unfair that is? Imagine going to work and your boss takes your computer and still expects you to get all your work done. Right? You're like, what? Excuse me? How am I supposed to do that? And like, I don't know, figure it out. Get it done. Get the work done. You still need to do all these things. Your heart still needs to beat. You still, your lungs, all that oxygen exchange, all that stuff still needs to happen. All that blood sugar regulation. It absolutely has to happen, because if it doesn't, luckily at your job, it's not going to result in you dying, but it's going to result in you not getting your work done and maybe paying other consequences. So imagine that your body's like, wait, what? You're going to take away my main resource and expect me to still get everything done? How the hell am I supposed to do that? Right? So it has to slow everything down, because you're not putting anything in. And it's working from nothing. It's like, how am I supposed to do all this stuff? You want energy to go shopping, but yet I have to just keep you alive. I have all of these things to keep you alive that I have to do. And I need water to do that. I need nutrients to do that. And you're cutting out my main 2 resources and still expecting me. And then you get mad at me. Your body's like, hold up. And also your inner child's pissed too, because again, it's like the kid who needs a snack and asks you 8 million times and you ignore them. You know what a kid is like when they don't get a snack. Yeah, that's your inner child. Like, hello, feed me, and then your body eventually gets your attention and all those things. And so it's like, okay, can that be a non-negotiable? Like, if I do nothing else throughout the holiday season, but I get in my water every day, boom, done. You have one success, like let everything else go. If you can do that one thing throughout the holiday season, your body will work so much better for you. Even when you eat the extra sugar cookie, even when you miss the walk, your body will still be able to work better for you and process all of those things better if you have water. So maybe I'll just scrap everything else I said, and we're just going to focus on water because that's how important it is. So that again, and just thinking like, how can I nutritionally support myself? And doing these things, the reason that this stuff is so important is because hangry is a term for a reason. So if we're not getting in the water, we're not getting in the food that we need, you're automatically going to be more vulnerable to feel triggered in a moment and snap. And it's going to take something small, something that someone said or someone did, or that lady cut in front of me in line, and you just, no emotional regulation in sight because you were not at your best because we didn't give ourselves and our body those things. So again, they're all related. They're all related. If you haven't cleared your energy from moving your body and you haven't nourished your body, guess what? It's going to be really hard to regulate your body when you need to in an energetic and emotional moment. It's all related. And so you can break it down to make it where you're really supporting yourself. So that way, if you are triggered, you can be like, "Whew, okay, I just need to step away. You know what? It is Christmas time. And if she wants to budge in front of me, like, so be it. I don't need to fly off the handle. This is not anything that needs my energy. I don't want to give energy to that. Bless and release you. I hope you enjoyed, getting done 30 seconds ahead of me, whatever it is. Like, don't hold on to that stuff. And that's the other thing is when you're, again, around family, when you're around, shopping centers, and it's a lot of people, that's a lot of energy. You have to do good energetic hygiene in clearing that. And so again, just seeing yourself as you're walking through those doors, like, just something kind of coming over you and like washing all that energy away or cutting that energy away, shake your hands and just feeling like you're shaking it off. Any of those things can help, but it's important to do those things. Otherwise you take then all the energy back home, and because now you're tired and you're cranky and now you've got carrying everyone else's energy. And so you might fly off the handle at your kids who literally did nothing wrong, but look at you and say, "Hi, Mom, I'm glad you're home." Right? And so support yourself in those ways. And that can be a game changer. Your other non-negotiables, it could be movement. Again, I know that I have to do those things, and it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to be at the gym. I have plans of, going for walks, and I like to plan that into the day as well, right? Like after you eat, like it just feels good to get out and move. And so, maybe I'll, ask one of my sisters or nieces or something like that. Like, "Hey, do you want to go for a walk?" And so we'll set that up ahead of time so that one of us is following up with each other afterwards, after the meal, because you want to like sit down and all of a sudden you want to nap. It's like, "Oh no, then we're going to go for a walk." Like, yeah. So that's the other thing too, is kind of like, hopefully you can find some support people. Or the other big tip is like, set the stage ahead of time. Have some of these conversations ahead of time, especially if there are topics that are off limits, things you're not comfortable about. And again, I know that in itself can be hard, but it's going to be a lot harder if you have to address it in the moment. Whereas if you can have a conversation with someone and be like, I'd really, like I mentioned last week, I'd really like to avoid politics talk, this holiday. Do you think we can all agree on that? And then if they do, great. If they don't, you can excuse yourself and like, "No, it's okay. I'm just going to go get, another drink of water." See what I did there? Or, "Oh, I just need to run to the bathroom quick." Or you can excuse yourself. And you can also straight up say like, I don't want to get into politics today. Like, I really want to enjoy the day. And so you do you, but I'm going to go over here and do my own thing. Like, there should be nothing wrong with that. And if, again, people have issues with that, that is their own stuff. That is their own projections. And so, but really, it's so important to tend to your inner child during the holidays, because again, we're going right back oftentimes to where some of these wounds started, whether it's with people, whether it's with places. And so where can you make sure that you are feeling seen, where you are feeling heard, where you are feeling loved and valued and appreciated and respecting your boundaries and all of these things. But remember, you cannot outsource these things to other people. If you're going to go home and expect for them to see these new changes in you and appreciate and value that and be excited for you, if you're excited for you, that's all you need. Do not let anyone else dim your light or make you feel bad about that. Know when people are projecting, and it'll save you a lot of tears and pain and all those other things. And unfortunately, that's real. And it's oftentimes people want us to kind of go back into those old roles. But when you have grown and you have changed, you deserve to be able to show up as your authentic self, who you are, expressing yourself, not dimming your light. And you might need to sit in the discomfort of what that feels like to kind of be in that transition where not everyone has gotten to know this new version of you yet. Reintroduce yourself, right? You might have to. Like, I know that, you're used to me, not speaking up, but I actually do have an opinion about this. Right? Or I know that was always kind of a funny joke in the past, but I actually don't appreciate bringing that up again. Right? Like, those are all things that you can say. And sometimes it might catch them off guard. You're like, oh my gosh, she spoke up. Like, hell yeah, I did. Or again, it could go the opposite way where they're not okay with that. And you have to be okay with that. Like, this is where, if you don't connect with your inner child over the holidays, this is where it gets tricky. This is not about the food. So how can you make sure going into these situations that you are giving yourself those things? Right? Or just realizing too that, it's likely that I'm not going to feel seen or heard when I go here, but I know that I can give myself those things anytime. I don't need to stand up on the table and make sure everyone hears me and I declare all these things. I don't need to do that to feel seen, right? So I know that's an extreme, but as long as you don't abandon yourself, that is key. And that is, again, hard because I know a lot of you listening are recovering people pleasers like me. And it's really easy for us to abandon people or abandon ourselves so we avoid making other people uncomfortable. But when we do that, we make ourselves uncomfortable and we make our inner child feel like he or she doesn't matter. And I know that's not the message you want to send. So please, I will wrap this up because I realize where we're at and I want people to actually listen to this because it is important information. And I could have, gone down a rabbit hole of so much more, but I hope this at least gets you thinking, before the holidays. But just give yourself that gift. Give your inner child the gift of your presence. Oh, I love when I drop this mic here. Did you hear that? Oh, that was a channeled message from my inner child to yours. Give your inner child the gift of your presence. That's all he or she wants. They don't need fancy things. They don't need material things. He or she doesn't need any of that. They truly just want you. So give them the gift of your presence and you will get through the holiday season with so much more calm and peace and happiness and joy. So I would love to receive the gift of hearing how you plan to do that. How can you be present for your inner child this holiday season? So leave a comment. I think you can do that on all platforms. So I would love to hear that. Send me a message. And let's set that intention, put that out there into the universe of this is how I'm going to show up. Write that down. Let yourself feel that, let your inner child feel that of how are you going to be present for them? How are you going to show up for them? And that can look a million different ways. But just even taking the time to think about that makes them feel loved and seen and heard by you. And then to follow up on that, ooh, that's the good stuff. That's the box. That's the I get to play in this box. It's so fun and exciting. It's just the extra. So anyway, thank you all so much. I hope you all have an amazing, amazing holiday season. Happy Thanksgiving. Obviously back way more throughout the month of December to share even more little nuggets like this. And if there was something that resonated or you want me to elaborate, on some of this, I certainly can. Like I said, I have a whole other page of notes that I didn't even get to about how the holidays can be triggering, but hopefully this was what you needed for this episode because there's lots more time and lots more to come. But again, stay tuned on my social media. So if you're not following me on Instagram or Facebook, please do that because that's where I'll be making a lot of those announcements on the giveaways that I plan to be doing to celebrate Sagittarius and birthday month. So I'm super excited for what this next year is going to bring for me and hopefully what that means for all of you, with a lot of my intentions being to grow this podcast and to keep sharing this message. So thank you all so much for giving me the gift to be able to do this for you. It truly means so much to me. So until next week, again, figure out how you're going to be present for your inner child. Give her that gift. All right. Bye, guys.